Hello and welcome. My name is Doughty, and you are watching the podcast formerly known as Sugar, Silk and Stretch, but more about that later. For the time being, first off, I would like to discuss when I see some of you actually join this live broadcast. I realise we've been away for a week, I think, since the last show. As I say, there's been some changes to the channel. There's going to be a new direction somewhat moving forward. So I just want to make sure some of you have got an opportunity to tune in to make sure I'm not broadcasting to nobody, although it will upload later to YouTube. But main topic of conversation to begin would be the mouth-watering domestic flyweight clash tomorrow night in Birmingham that pits Sunny Edwards against Galal Yafai. Maybe I will wait to see the first evidence of a presence on board. It does make a big difference to me, the sense of an audience. It always has done. Right now, it is telling me we have a big fat 0 tuned in. Just give me 1 and I will keep going. Ultimately, I should probably keep going regardless because this will upload to the live channel content that can be watched after the event. And if I don't keep a coherent flow up, then it probably will affect the quality of that video. So let me proceed. So Sunny Edwards versus Galal Yafai. I noticed that Steve Bunce referred to it in his Daily Telegraph column as the best fight at the weight in nearly 40 years. Now, I'm guessing the precedent he's referring to before that would probably be Charlie Magri versus Duke McKenzie, perhaps. We live in a different era, of course. We live in different days whereby now Galal Yafai versus Sunny Edwards is billed as being for, I think it's a WBC interim title, vacant title. But ultimately, you know, and I know that's all part of the kind of packaging for professional boxing today. And that this ultimately is, as I described it, it's a mouth-watering domestic clash. Sunny, of course, has not, he's boxed once since the defeat to Jesse Ben Rodriguez in December last year. He rebounded with a win over Adrian Curiel, in which I believe he suffered a rather bad cut. Galal Yafai brings 8 fights to the table. Obviously, he was an elite world-class amateur and Olympic gold medalist, but he has 8 professional fights to his name at the moment. He's been the 10-round distance, I believe, twice in the course of those 8 rounds. He has 6 stoppages from the 8 fights. I do think it is probably, I do feel on safe ground when I say that Yafai is the puncher in this fight. Of the two of them, Sunny, as we know, has those mercurial skills. Never been a huge puncher. I don't think he would claim to be. And by the way, who's that in the house? I just see one person at the minute. I suspect it might be Richie over there with Chrissy watching. But whoever it is, if you want to leave a comment and give me a bit of grease to keep the machinery running. I see there's 2 people now, so that's a start. As I say, I think Sunny has got fantastic skills. Never been a huge puncher. I don't think he's ever cared about being a huge puncher. I think, like as Michael Alajide always said, punching to some extent was an attitude of mind. He would say everybody has a different way to hunt, and sometimes it's not in a fighter's kind of ring mentality, ring philosophy, to be, to be seeking stoppages and having that seek and destroy attitude. Sunny is an artist in the ring. He's a beautiful boxer, very mobile, creative, great, fast hands, great combination puncher, great defence. And I say never been a huge puncher. To me, Yafai looks bigger at the weight. Who we got? Yeah, Tanked March the 1st. That's true facts. Whoever facts is that account, I did see that the postponed Gervonta Davis-Lamont Roach fight has now been rescheduled for the Barclays Centre in Brooklyn on March the 1st. I want to talk about Gervonta Davis a little bit later in the show, but sticking with Edwards Yafai for the time being. What was I saying? I think Yafai does look the bigger of the 2 at the weight. And one would assume he might have a strength edge. Obviously, Sunny Edwards is the kind of boxer that renders that kind of thing academic on occasion. Darren Metcalf, hey Ben, hope you're good. What's happening, Darren? Good to see you on here, mate. As I say, I'm talking about the Edwards Yafai fight up to now. I did want to explain to people as well that some of the challenges, sorry, some of the changes being made to the channel of Sugar, Silk and Stretch. Essentially, it will be rebranding to a different name shortly. Gary is away right now. Michael Olajide is sidelined with another project. So I wanted to come up with a name that was less dependent on our particular brand and our three names, so I can work with other people. Michael and Gary can come in as and when, and we'll see where it goes. But we will be rebranding the channel regardless. As I say, the thing for me with making a prediction on Edwards Yafai, for what it's worth, the bookies make Sunny a slight favourite. I think Sunny was about 8 to 11 last time I checked on Sky Bet. Yafai, I believe, is something like 11 to 10. So there's a little bit more value on Yafai for what it's worth. Abid Ali, the professor, says, remember when Carbajal and Olsen was the dream bout? Yeah. I mean, the thing is, I remember the thing, you have to be an aficionado, Abid. Excuse me with the tissues. Everybody I know, like clients and friends today that I met up with, are all suffering from sniffles and colds and all the rest of it. I'm no exception, it would seem, but I hope it doesn't impede my flow too much. Abby, just like to say, to follow the flyweight division and to be conversant with the history of the flyweight division, you have to be a boxing anorak. You know, you have to be a boxing aficionado like yourself, because I remember when Sonny lost to Jesse Bam Rodriguez last year, and when Rodriguez went to his dressing room afterwards, and Sonny was still on a rub down table being tended to, he said to him, obviously there was no hard feelings, there was lots of mutual respect after all the needle and the back and forth in the build up. And he said, Sonny said, listen, you know, you're a fantastic fighter. And he says, and you know, we should be proud, bro, of what we achieved with this. But he said, because flyweights don't get this. He said, flyweights don't get this. He talks in that kind of rude boy sort of accent that he seemed to have acquired at some point since he moved from Sutton, and by way of training at TKO and Canning Town. Sonny's voice and accent definitely changed when he was hanging around with some more kind of urban crew. But he said flyweights don't get this, you know. So obviously the flyweight division, whenever there is a big fight, which the greater kind of more mainstream public pays attention to, it's obviously a breakthrough, because it's a simple fact that fighters generally, certainly under 100. I remember KO Magazine always had this yardstick that they were saying it was very rare to get a marketable crossover star who was under 130 pounds, and they were saying that Barry McGuigan was one. But in any case, my problem with making a prediction comes down to this. Whenever you know a fighter, I've known Sunny Edwards since he was a young amateur. He used to train at the TKO gym. Back at the TKO gym, I'm talking like 2012, 2013. There were a bunch of young amateurs who trained obsessively at that gym who stood out. There was four kids in the main who stood out that you might have thought might be earmarked for some future notoriety and success. They were the Edwards brothers, Charlie and Sonny. There was Anthony Yard was another one, and Ahara Davies was the other one. And you could see that they all achieved varying degrees of success, and they all became, familiar with boxing fans in the UK for several years to come. But the problem for me, right, and I've done it with other of those fighters in that lineup. When you know people, you get this kind of bias. You can't be dispassionate about it, and you have this thing where you don't feel as if you can pick against them. So that kind of loyalty led me to pick Ahara Davies against Josh Taylor, which I look back on and think was just a dumb pick, and I wasn't using my boxing brain to come up with that, or I never would have come up with it in the first place. Similarly, I'm not going to claim that me and Sonny Edwards or Charlie Edwards are like that, but I did go with Sonny to get his license from the British Boxing Board of Control, because he was an MTK fighter at the time. He was based out in Spain. His team was based out in Spain. And Sonny, when he went for his professional license, he needed a British, a representative, a member of the British Boxing Board of Control, a license holder, to go with him. That's the way it works. You can't just turn up on your own. So he asked me, would I go with him to get his license, and I did. And obviously they gave him a license as if they weren't going to. But because of that, I picked Sonny against Jesse Bam Rodriguez. I remember the Silk on this show. He picked he picked Rodriguez and got one over on me. And you know how competitive the Silk was when it came to our little predictions league. So I'm not going to let my heart rule my head. So I'm not going to make a definitive prediction. I'll be interested in hearing your predictions. I'm not going to make a definitive prediction. I will say I think the fight probably goes the distance. Some of you who have an eye on the odds and like to have a flutter on boxing, you probably know that you can make a bet on whether the fight goes the distance or not. You don't have to say you don't have to pick a winner. You can simply pick, does the fight go the distance or doesn't it? I think this one was about, it was 10-3 that it doesn't. So obviously the bookies expect it to go the distance. I think it was about, you know what, I don't remember, but it was, the odds were not great on it not going on it going the distance. If you wanted to bet that it goes the full route, you'd be laying down like 40 quid to make a tenner, as I recall. I think Sunny wins close on point split, maybe. Yeah. I mean, there you go. I think it could be controversial, Darren. Certainly, because whichever one of them wins, I think it could be controversial. It almost seems mandatory these days that decisions are controversial, and we have one disparate card that seems out of step with the other two. People always argue about decisions. I mean, the problem I have, a lot of people complain about decisions when they don't score fights. They don't, and some of them don't necessarily know how to score fights, but they will get their impression, they will get their overview. They'll be influenced by whatever they see in a fight. They might also be influenced by the commentary team, and what they are saying. So you'll get people saying, "Oh, that was never a such and such for me." I think that so and so won. But when you ask them how they scored it, and they'll say, "Oh, I had such and such by 3 or 4 rounds." It's like, no, mate, not by 3 or 4 rounds. What you've got to tell me is exactly how many rounds you scored it. And sometimes they haven't scored it. And to be honest with you, I don't know about you guys at home, but I don't score fights that often when I'm watching them live because I prefer just to watch them. To me, it feels like I don't feel like I'm fully relaxing watching the boxing. If I'm totting up a score at the end, I will do sometimes if I feel it's going to be controversial, or if I think people are especially going to be asking me how I scored it, then I will do that because here's the thing: it's all very well doing a rewatch, which I've done many times as well. But when you do that, I always remember Barry Jones saying, "Fuck your rewatch scores. Fuck saying." Well, I watched it again, and this time I had such and such by 2 rounds. He says the only proper, real, genuine, organic verdict you can reach is when it's actually happening, and that you can't rewatch it. The judges are not rewatching it. I remember I used to have some kind of associate who turned out to be treacherous, and he used to watch fights at quarter speed, and he'd watch them 5 times at quarter speed. Then he'd say that, like Curtis Woodhouse versus Darren Hamilton was a robbery, and he knows because he's seen it 4 times at quarter speed. Well, that anybody who's got the time on their hands for that, is another level of unemployed, I would suggest. But I remember Barry Jones anyway saying, if you're going to score it live, and I can think there is a lot of logic and truth in that. Jab and Grab said the fight doesn't seem that relevant to me. What's happening to the matchroom stable? Well, I think Jab and Grab, to me, it's just a great domestic matchup. I mean, Steve Bunce said, I don't know if you tuned in earlier when I said that Steve Bunce had billed it in the Telegraph as the best fight at flyweight, the best domestic fight at flyweight in 40 years. I don't know if that's true or not, but to me, I think it's a genuine, intriguing fight because my loyalties are to Sunny Edwards because of his boxing ability, his radar-like defence, his ring generalship, his flair, his combination punching, and he's tough as well. Like I say, I mean, all right, he got stopped by Jesse Bam Rodriguez. He didn't swallow it. He's a tough kid too. Like I say, if there's one part of boxing armour he lacks, it's a kind of equaliser punch. He doesn't have that kind of power, and he doesn't set himself to get that kind of power. But as much as I'm an admirer of Sunny Edwards, I've watched Yafai a little bit this week to refresh my kind of familiarity with him. And because Yafai, right, his last fight was against a journeyman on I think it was the Rhiannon Dixon Terry Harper show. It was a guy with a 9-8 record. Sonny was commentating, and he rightly said it proved nothing. It was literally just a run out, just to maybe to clear a bit of ring rust. It was the epitome of a tune up. And bear in mind, I remember saying to Errol Christie once when he had some, I believe he was taking a 10-rounder before he fought Mark Kaler just to stay busy. And I said, I see you're taking a tune-up, Errol. And he said, it's not a tune-up, it's a fight. And as if he pulled me up as if to say, I was only a teenager, but as if to say, don't ever call it a tune-up, and don't ever get complacent. Don't ever be casual in your reference to this, because every fight is a fight, and I see that. But if you look at Yafai's last fight, it was the classic tune-up. With all due respect to his import opponent. So the last more kind of cutting-edge fight that Yafai had was earlier this year. I think it was back in June, when he beat a guy called Augustin Gauto, who he stopped in 8 rounds at the Fontainebleau Hotel in Las Vegas. And I've been watching your fight, and he's a seriously talented operator. As I said before, he looks to be a bigger puncher than Sunny Edwards. I think that's fair to say. But like Sunny, he's a switch hitter, and he's a great boxer, and he's mobile. He's a great combination puncher. He's got a good boxing IQ and all the rest of it. So I think, in response to jab and grab saying you don't think it's a usually relevant fight, or it doesn't really do it for you, I do think it is a somewhat of a mouth-watering matchup. What's Abid Ali saying? After a while, you just know who won without scoring it. You know what the collective output dominated. I disagree with that, Abid. I don't agree ever that you know who won without scoring it. I think this is the problem, because Alajane thought that too. He talk about how he thinks that Haney did beat Lomachenko, even though lots of people thought Lomachenko was robbed. And I said, but you didn't score it, did you? And he's like, no, I watched it and I formed an opinion. Well, to me, that's completely useless. I'm not. It's better his opinion, a learned pair of eyes watching it, than it is just anybody's opinion. But it's still, you either score it or forget about it. If you don't score, obviously, if you're talking about an obvious fight like, let's say, Pernell Whitaker versus Jose Luis Ramirez, it's obvious to a blind man on a runaway horse that Whitaker was robbed, and you don't have to score a fight to know that Hector Camacho beat Jose Luis Ramirez, for instance, right? Using Ramirez as the link for this example. But when a fight is remotely nuanced or close, you have to score it, because even, here's another one. Sometimes people will say there'll be a tough fight, it's fiercely contested, and perhaps the winner's even picked up a bit of facial damage, but he'll win by a relative shutout on the cards, or one card, or whatever. And people will say that's a joke. I don't know what fight that such and such was watching when he scored it, like, he scored it 192 or whatever, or he scored it 118, 1111. But you can have close rounds that are all, there's a preponderance of them all going to the same fighter, in which case you get a wide scorecard in a fight in which each unit of competition, i.e., a boxing round, 3 minutes, was closely contested. Do you know what I mean? So I'm all about the scoring, and as I say, I freely admit that I don't always score, because I prefer to watch fights, to be honest with you, and just watch them unfold. But if I'm going to start shouting the odds about who won in a close fight, I have to score it. Some betting sites are offering 8-1 for your fighter win by TKO in around 7-12. You know what else, Darren, is a good bet? And I've never seen this bet before. On Sky Bet, there's a double chance, it's called. You can bet, for instance, Galal Yafai to win on points or stoppage in round 7-12. So somebody, when you bet either on a stoppage or a points decision, and one of them doesn't come to pass, so you get annoyed. I know you obviously could cover both bases, but it's quite nice to be able to cover both bases with the same bet, knowing that it will still come in. Obviously, the odds are factored in accordingly, and your rewards are going to be slightly less. But I've never seen that. I've never seen that bet before, and I think that's quite an interesting bet in future, because you can make money, right, moderately or big amounts of money depending on your stake betting on boxing. But you have to look for the value. You can't just bet with winners, obviously, because boxing is often, quite seldom actually, is boxing evenly stacked. And then when we do get the 50-50 fights, that's when we all salivate and we really anticipate and argue about our predictions. Whereas, as you know, as boxing devotees, a lot of fights are more kind of already decided before they get in the ring, if you will. Not fixed in a Guy Ritchie-esque manner, but just in other ways. But I was going to say, so I've made money in the past on betting how many punches that Canelo and Jamie Munguia might throw over the course of a fight. So you can look for angles like that. So I quite like the double chance one. Does your fight have an element of sweet C in him? That pure boxing ability? He doesn't remind me of Colin McMillan, Abid, but he is. I would say Sunny Edwards had more of the Colin McMillan in him personally, in terms of any kind of aesthetic resemblance. Example: Fidel Castro, Henry Wharton. Yeah, I assume you're talking about a close fight with a wide card. I would think you're picking up on that point, Abid. Joe, if I was talking to Sunny Edwards about a game plan. He doesn't need me to talk to him about a game plan, and he's got a good trainer. I believe he's not with Grant Smith anymore, right? Is he? Is Sunny with I think Sunny might be with that Liverpool guy now. Is he with Joe McNally now? Maybe one of you could tell me that. It's probably something I should have looked into before I came on air. But I think that I recently learned that Sonny is no longer with Grant Smith, which could be a factor because they work very well together, and most of his kind of high end success has been with Grant in the corner, and obviously they understood each other very well. But if I was talking to Sonny about uh, the keys to victory, as they used to be called, with that Teddy Atlas kind of bit, I would advise him to. I don't want to say invest in the body because that term sounds wank, but I would advise him to target the body because Yafai, right, as you may have noticed, he holds it guard up like this. So he's got like a high guard, bit like Dimitri Bivol. They rely on foot mobility, but they've got this high guard as well, and his hands are up here, which obviously, if your hands are up there, if that's where your default position is for your guard, instead of like let's say shoulder level, then obviously your elbows are higher, which means your body is more exposed. It doesn't mean that your fight can't and doesn't make adjustments when people throw body shots. But looking at the fight with Gauto was having success with two things. One was body shots, the body attack in general. He was finding a target for. The other one was the right hook. People will tell you that a right hook is a pretty good shot for an orthodox to throw against a southpaw. Your fire is predominantly a southpaw. Um, classically, everybody says throw the right hand straight down the pipe against a southpaw, right? I actually think the right hook is a more effective shot. The overhand right is another shot you can have success with. The overhand right, incidentally, I think is the hardest shot to teach anybody. Especially, it's definitely the hardest shot to teach novices because there's something about the overhand right which is it's not in the textbook, and you very seldom learn it as an amateur. In the amateurs, they'll show you the two straight punches, they'll show you the two hooks, and they'll show you the two uppercuts. And the left hook to the body, whatever, lead hook to the body. But not many amateur coaches will show you how to loop a right hand over, like a la Tim Witherspoon, like when he knocked out Anders Eklund and kind of Tim used it a lot. Tim was probably the finest exponent of the overhand right that springs immediately to my mind. That was instrumental in him knocking out Frank Bruno and a whole bunch of other guys. But so I would advise Sunny Edwards. We know he's not a puncher. We've said that, and I don't think Sunny will be banking on having an early shower. I don't think that will enter his mentality or his game plan. But I would advise Sunny Edwards to target the body more than somewhat, and I would also cancel the right hook from the orthodox position. What's Abid saying? Azuma style. Yeah, what we were talking about Azuma style was the I'm not sure what the Azuma Nelson reference is right now, but maybe it's the overhand right. You think stab a jab into the body, or straight right touch and go downstairs? Yeah, well, I would just say target the body in general. I mean, the jab to the body is fair enough, Darren, but I'm more thinking of power shots to the body. I'm thinking of a straight right hand to the body or a right hook to the body. I'm thinking of a left hook to the body, which I think is the best and the most iconic body shot. I think there is something beautiful about that left hook to the rib cage, to the liver, to the floating rib. Because it's just, I think it's not an easy shot to master, but once you have mastered it, it's an easy shot to throw because it's right there. You if you're orthodox, you drop your shoulder and you let the shot go, right? So, and then it's so well made for a hook upstairs as well. You throw the hook to the body, then you throw the hook to the head. I'd see Mike Tyson, right, used to like to throw that hook to the body, then he'd throw the right hook to the head, that's the dynamics of that are harder to master because it's easy to. I'm not sure about the wisdom of me doing these kind of demonstrations when I'm sitting down at home and the camera is not capturing everything I do. But if you throw a left hook to the body, right, it's easy to reset and then throw the hook to the head. It works. To throw left hook to the body and then throw your right hand immediately afterwards, the mechanics of that are slightly different. The rhythm of that's slightly different. But people don't expect you to do it. But, the thing with Sonny is whether he targets the body and uses the right hook premeditatedly or not, it's not, you don't picture Sunny Edwards scoring a highlight reel KO here. You know, stranger things have happened, but you don't. I know that some of you, I'm looking at the predictions on my Facebook page, and I think it's about 60-40 in favour of Sunny, pretty similar to the bookmaking odds, to be honest with you. I do know a significant body of people, a significant minority, who fancy Yafai to do it. A lot of those are saying they fancy Yafai via late stoppage. You get that classic narrative often that if it goes a distance, they fancy probably Sunny to get his hand held up. If there is a stoppage, they fancy Yafai. You know, I can see the logic behind that. I'm not going to make a prediction because I've been honest with you in saying that I feel loyal to Sunny Edwards, not saying that we're blood brothers because we're certainly not. But I've known him a long time. I like him. I like his style. I've always liked his style. I like his brother Charlie, and I'm friendly with people who are closer than I am. So I feel as if I don't feel comfortable picking against Sunny Edwards. And I'm not saying I think Yafai's going to win. I just don't think I'm being fair to either one of them if I make a prediction because I'm not giving it my best shot dispassionately with Yafai. I look at Yafai and I think the kid can seriously fight. And we don't know if he's got the minerals yet. He's never been 12 rounds. We don't know if he has that hallmark of a champion that people need at whatever level of champion they might be. You know, when they can win a fight when the chips are down and they can go through to to some deep waters and dark places. I don't think we know that about Yafai yet. Whereas we know about Sunny Edwards, but to be even in some of his victories, you know, he hasn't been matched easy, and he's beat some damn good flyweights. You could argue that when Sunny Edwards was really in deep waters, he lost and got stopped, but I think that would be a little bit unfair to him because that was a great fight with Rodriguez, and somebody had to lose it. I should put the comments up. I've not been flashing the comments up this week. I don't know why not. It says, "Yeah, get you, mate." Mad thing is, I'm getting my flyweight champ to do the mini left, the left hook to the body, right hook. Yeah. I don't know why I forgot to flash the comments up this week. As I say, you guys will have made your mind up who you fancy winning tonight. I just think it's a great fight, and I'm really looking forward to it because I don't know who's going to win, and those are the kind of fights we want to see, right? Where we can make it a robust scenario for either fighter. What else has been happening? I see that the Chris Eubank Jr. Conor Benn talks seem to have cooled. Eddie Hearn was still saying earlier this week, or being quoted on Twitter as saying, "We're very hopeful. We hope we could get this done." Because the idea, I was told maybe 3 weeks ago now, or at least 2 weeks ago, two people I know had been to the Nigel Benn night that he's doing right now. He was touring the UK recently, and they said, "Here's an exclusive for you." One of them has been to the Nigel Benn night, and one of them is a security man who has got his ear to the ground because sometimes the guys who work security for SA UK or the Man Commercial Protection or whatever the firm that is doing some of Frank Warren's shows now. I think it's still Man CP, but people who work for Roma Security or Man CP sometimes I don't want to compromise anybody, but sometimes they know things and they've got their ear to the ground. And sometimes it might be a security man who knows a press conference has been called as an emergency because he's had to lay staff on for it, who tells you what's going on. And I was told by one security man and one simple punter who'd been to the Nigel Benn show that Eubank versus Conor Benn was a done deal for February 22nd. And if it was February 22nd, you have to assume it was the Riyadh season show, which has also got Joseph Parker versus Daniel Dubois. You have Dmitry Bivol versus Artur Beterbiev too. What else? There was another one. Virgil Ortiz versus... Was it Virgil Ortiz versus Jerome Ennis? I believe so. Mouth-watering card, typical Turkey style, stack bill. And they were trying to tack Eubank Benn onto that. But most recently, we've heard that you've seen Conor Benn is calling out Mario Barrios for whatever fucking bastardized paper version of the WBA welterweight title he holds. We know that the welterweight champion of the world is called Terence Crawford, right? We know that there's a seriously good fighter underneath him who holds the IBF strap called Jerome Ennis. Whatever title is Barrios the WBA regular champion at welterweight? Whoever it is, that who Ben is targeting. You know my feelings on all this nonsense, and you know how I feel about the idea that Conor Benn goes and beats Mario Barrios and calls himself a world champion. It's fraudulent, it's nonsense, and it's the sort of thing that could almost make you turn away from boxing one day because you get fed up of standing against it till you're blue in the face, and nobody comes with you on it, nobody backs you up. But let's not let this descend into a rant. So if Ben is looking like maybe fighting Barrios now instead of Eubank Jr., Eubank Jr. for his part, it was Rick Glazer, the American pundit who's quite big on Twitter. He's kind of respected and hated in equal measure, I would say. I wouldn't say loved and hated. I would say respected and hated and despised in equal measure. Rick Glazer. He said that it would appear that Chris Eubank Jr. is going to fight Erislandy Lara next spring. Lara, of course, is the WBA middleweight champion. So presumably, if that is the case, and that's going to be on with Boxer on Sky, then one would safely assume that the Conor Ben fight's gone cold. If that's the case, if they fight, no, Eubank Jr. versus Adames, no, Hamza Shiraz is fighting him, Darren. Keeping up with the middleweight roundup, Hamza Shiraz will be fighting Carlos Adames for the WBC middleweight title. Interestingly, I believe Hamza Shiraz has also been struck from the WBO rankings because the new president, whose name is what's his name? The new WBO president, who's called something begins with a G. So once again, I should know that. But I'm gonna let me get my computer near me so I can find that out. The guy that replaced Paco Valcarcel, the new WBO president, said that they have a new rule, which means any fighter who turns down a WBO title shot is automatically removed from the rankings. Okay, so that's what happens if you do that, you're removed from the rankings because you turn down a fight. Now, because boxing is like it's like a strategic board game, isn't it? Professional boxing, and you try to pick up the leverage trinkets for as much remuneration and the lowest risk as possible, and you use it to leverage your future fights. And if you ever get into a really dangerous roll of dice fight, then you want it to be for maximum remuneration. Some people even call it cash out when they've got to a point when they can take the risk because they put themselves in such a good position financially and perhaps even in terms of legacy to the point where they can finally have the fight which the fans have wanted for about 5 years. So let me just check the WBO president's name because I want to remind myself of that. Yeah, his name is Gustavo Oliveri. Gustavo Oliveri says there is a new rule he's implemented which says if you turn down a WBO title shot, then that's you struck from the rankings. I mean, I approve of that because it stops fighters playing it like it's some game of risk, you know what I mean? But then, obviously, fighters would say that they're taking the risk. So there you go. You've got Hamza Shiraz will be fighting Carlos Adames. I think that's going to be on the February 22nd card as well, right? That was always the intention, yeah? So Eubank Ben not looking as likely at the minute since we're talking about Erislandy Lara for Eubank and Mario Barrios for Conor Ben. Having said so, usually when people tell me things, especially the security man, when he told me that Ben versus Eubank was made, and then shortly after he told me that, within days, Conor Ben was cleared by the National Anti-Doping Panel. I thought it all ended up, and I thought I was on really safe ground with that. But you get it wrong sometimes. In my favour, when someone told me that Jarrell Miller versus Derek Chisora had fallen through and he was fighting Otto Wallin instead, I put that out there immediately, and I seem to be 2 days ahead of the Michael Benson seems to be the barometer for boxing news on Twitter, certainly from any British source, and I posted that 2 days before he did. So you win some, you lose some. What else has been happening? We spoke about Gervonta Davis, right? We spoke about Gervonta Davis being his fight with Lamont Roach has been moved back to March the 1st at the Barclays Centre. How's it going, Bruce Guess? What's up, man? See, Gervonta Davis, right? He's becoming. Some people are referring to him as the 30-year-old prospect. He's got talent and skills and power to burn, but people say that Tank is still following this very Floyd Mayweather Jr. blueprint, and he's not fighting anybody really meaningful, and he's not been. Lightweight was one of the most mouth-watering divisions in boxing, and it probably still is. And people were looking at the leading lights of that division and saying this could be another Fab Four situation if they match them all. With like Lomachenko, Shakur Stevenson, Gervonta Davis, and so on. But Davis appears to be Davis appears to be taking his time. Perhaps he's being managed badly. Perhaps he's being marketed badly. Perhaps he's being badly advised. Perhaps he or someone else close to him doesn't believe in his ability. I find it hard to believe that he wouldn't believe in his ability. Because to be honest with you, Tank is my favourite active fighter purely in what he does in the ring. I don't judge. I don't get into the moral debate about him or any virtue signalling. Some people say, oh, he's a woman beater. He's a punk. He's just a street punk. He's got no class. I don't get involved in that, to be honest with you. If such a thing occurs whereby I feel I need to take more of a moral position on Gervonta Davis, then no doubt I would do that in due course. But for now, he's my favourite fighter. He's just the one who floats my boat by what he does in the ring because, I think he's a scientist. He's got a great ring IQ. He can punch like the devil. He's got great skills and he's super smart. The Ryan Garcia fight a while ago was a massive fight. They were calling at the time it was the biggest fight of the year, perhaps of I think 2022, right? But it was like a mismatch, really. He was just so much smarter than Garcia, and you saw what happened. So I can't wait to see Ben lose, says Winston Wokill. This is the thing, Winston. I think that Conor Ben now is this vilified figure because I think in the court of public opinion, most boxing fans don't believe him. Some of them are loyal to him still, and that loyalty might be based on a loyalty to Nigel Benn as well. But I think the average boxing fan who's followed the saga doesn't believe Conor Ben was innocent of doping. And I think more than that, they don't believe he ever proved how he came to fail two tests for the substance clomiphene in the first place. I think I've done it to death on here with Gary and Michael over the 2 years that the saga's been going on for. So my position now is he has been cleared. And you know what? Even though he fought twice against that, he fought the tough Mexican in Texas. He fought the other guy in Las Vegas. He got 2 10-round runs, okay, which would have done him some good rather than collecting complete dust for the 2 years. But you can't deny that Conor Ben has paid a price and suffered a kind of career interruption as a result. His career momentum and progress was seriously arrested. His brand was damaged, perhaps irrevocably. So one cannot argue that there's not been a kind of natural justice in the Conor Ben case because he has suffered. His momentum has suffered, and I say his reputation has suffered. And with some people, he may never get back there. What does Ellen K. Bromson think? Ben, can you please slow down for us older boxing folk? Yeah. It's because I'm doing it on my own as well, Ellen. It's also because I feel all blocked up now. And it feels if I talk first, then I feel like I can keep going. I feel if I stop, then I might become too congested. It's weird, but yeah, I understand what you're saying, Winston. A lot of people are against Ben now, whereas before I think he had a lot of people in his corner. He had a lot of people on his side, whereas now he's going to be this polarizing fighter. But as I say, I'm going to put it to one side now, the drug thing, and say, okay, he's back. He's been cleared. It doesn't look like there will be any further action or any more appeals. And let's see him crack on and judge him accordingly because I feel he has paid a penalty in a way, even though he was never dealt a ban as such. With the suspension and with the controversy and the fallout, I think he's paid a price, and obviously all eyes will be on him now, so he'll still be drug tested for fights and we'll have to see how it goes. I mean, I probably would like to see him crack on in his own division, to be honest with you, rather than see a fight with Chris Eubank Jr. I was interested in the Eubank Jr. fight when it was supposed to happen in October 2022. And then it was pulled on the week of the fight. As you may remember, it was Wednesday at the public workout, the media workout, that the story broke. And at that point, they were maintaining a brave face and saying the fight's still going ahead. Well, as you know, the fight didn't go ahead. And nothing went ahead really for Ben until his suspension was lifted. He managed to get a run out in Texas. He got a run out in Las Vegas. Then the suspension was upheld, and then next minute he was on the sidelines again, and now he's back. So I don't suppose I really care if he fights Chris Eubank Jr. or not. What I'd like to see is as many meaningful, decent fights as we possibly can, while knowing that, as Barry Hearn said, not every day at work is a special day at work. You know, he said we don't have a right to see a man kill himself every 8 weeks, referring to Chris Eubanks' run of title defences when he was defending the title on Sky Television roughly every 8 weeks, and he was saying some of them were big fights and against giant killers, and some of them were just jobbing fights against the kind of routine defences against your John Jarvis and such. What else has happened? Does anybody have any interest in the Conor McGregor case? I mean, it's my remit is boxing, and as far as I'm concerned, Conor McGregor has precious little to do with boxing. But the reason I found the case interesting to an extent was because of some of the parallels that some people cited with the Mike Tyson rape case back in 1992. So it's something that I would say a few words about if you wanted me to, but if not, I don't really care. What else has been happening? What else has been happening? What I'll finish on when we decide that we've exhausted the topics for this particular episode, I'll explain to you what's happening with the channel and where we're going from there. It's going to have a new name. It's not going to be called Sugar Silk and Stretch soon. And the only reason I haven't rebranded it and changed it to the new name already is because I want to find the right branding and get a logo that I'm happy with. And I also want you guys to know it's the same channel, because I still want you to tune in and follow us and support us. The small amount of hardcore that's supported us up to now for the 2 years since we started initially with Sugar and Silk, I still want you to support us. So I don't want you to think the channel just vanished and not realise what this is. Obviously, you'll still be subscribed to it, but I want enough of you to be aware that we've changed the name. And I will reveal that in due course. Hopefully going to have Oliver McCall on Sunday night. I'm still waiting to get it double confirmed, but I'm hoping to bring you an interview with former WBC heavyweight champion Oliver the Atomic Bull McCall on Sunday night. That'll be 9 o'clock UK time, 4 p.m. EST. If they want me to tweak it and do it at a different time, then I will do, because one of the advantages of doing this solo right now is that I can be more flexible without having to coordinate Michael and Gary at the same time. I'm not saying you've seen the last of Silk and Stretch completely, but I'm pressing on, heading that up as more of a solo project for the time being. That's one thing I want to make you aware of. And when we rebrand, certainly at some point next month in December, and it's next month on, I believe, is it? Next week it'll be December, right? So at some point in December, we'll be rebranded, and I'll reveal to you the new name of the channel and the podcast. What else? That might be about it for now, unless there's something, unless one of you wants to raise a topic. As I say, I'm looking forward to the main event, certainly in Birmingham tomorrow. There's some decent fights on the undercard. I saw people speculating that Conor Walker versus Lewis Ritson should be a barn burner. That you've got Gavin Gwynn versus Cameron Vyong, right? There isn't another fight on the card that particularly captures my imagination ahead of time, but Edwards versus Yafai certainly does. And I hope Sunny Edwards wins, because, as I said to you, Sunny Edwards is the one that I have some sort of a relationship with. And one thing that's interesting, by the way, is I see some people they're talking about Edwards almost as if he's coming to the end of a long career, because the filter of modern boxing fans is strange compared to a more kind of historical boxing fan, because they're talking as if he's like really long in the tooth, and he's had 60 odd fights like Marvin Hagler or something. Sonny Edwards has had 21 professional contests, I believe. And he's only, do you know what? He's only 28. Galal Yafai is 31, right? He was one of those guys who invested in his elite amateur career, so he didn't turn pro as early as he might have done. So Galal Yafai, he might be the fresher in terms of a professional boxing rounds, but Galal Yafai is older than Sonny Edwards. All right, so little men burn out quicker, they think. There seems to be some truth in that. I'm sure if the Silk was here, he'd argue and say it was the other way around, with his mandatory unorthodoxy and rebelliousness. But let's say Sonny Edwards has only had 21 pro fights. He's only 28 years old. So all this talk about how much has Sonny got left, he's had a longer, hard career, I do think that's a little exaggerated. Raymond Hales, I appreciate your comment. You said, yeah, good idea. Keep going, man. Well, listen, this is the thing, right, Raymond? We're going to change the name. I'll tell you now. We're going to change the name to The Hardest Game. That is what this podcast and this channel will be called, The Hardest Game. The value of that is I can work with lots of other people. I can have other interviewers covering press conferences if I think they can do enough of a good job. And it's a brand. It's not dependent on the cartooniness of Sugar, Silk and Stretch. I don't want to be called Sugar anyway. I only did that because it was a gimmick that sounded good with Silk and Stretch. To me, to be honest, it's a bit semi-embarrassing going by that old amateur nickname that I gave myself at 15. So I'd rather move on. I just think it's time to move on, and it's time to expand the channel, make it a bigger commercial deal. And I think The Hardest Game has got more legs. And then that way, if Gary Stretch is working for The Hardest Game 1 week or for 1 year or whatever, then that works. If Michael Olajide comes back in, we can introduce another figure, you know, a young, keen interviewer who did a good job, and it suddenly becomes a brand that is bigger than just our names of, you know, of Ben Doughty, Michael Olajide, and Gary Stretch. So the new name for this channel is The Hardest Game. I will, once I've got the branding and the logo sorted, that is what it'll be called. So guys, please, when it changes, don't think Sugar, Silk and Stretch vanished. I don't think that it's not still me, and it's not still the same quality that you know and love. It's just going to be called The Hardest Game. I'm just waiting for a logo that doesn't disrupt things too much, and there's got a bit of continuity with the kind of font and imagery we use for the Sugar, Silk and Stretch logo, etc. And we'll go from there. That feels like it might be a wrap. This is 45 minutes. The other good thing about working solo sometimes is that I get to call it when I call it instead of waiting for a convenient gap and a place to finish. I think I found it this week. Sunday, I am very much hoping to bring you Oliver McCall, who you probably know had a win at the age of 59 just last week or the weekend before last. So I'm not particularly interested in the fact he's still fighting, but I am very interested in the life he's had, sparring with Mike Tyson, the drug addiction, you know, the mental institutions, being heavyweight champion of the world, upsetting the apple cart versus Lennox Lewis, losing to Frank Bruno in London. He's had a legendary career, and I very much look forward to talking to him, assuming we get this solid. You know how ex-fighters are, you know how tech unsavvy they tend to be, but I'm very much hoping we get the Oliver McCall interview over the line for Sunday. Stay tuned, keep punching, be lucky.